If these allegations are true, we are talking about a scandal of profound proportions for this community. The children of a Florida matriarch take the stand to deliver the most devastating evidence yet against a grandmother accused of orchestrating her son-in-law's murder. Plus, wild allegations of corruption and pay-for-play sex acts involving a Kentucky judge shot in his chambers by the county sheriff. And the prosecution holds nothing back in condemning a judge for allowing a California man now accused of murdering his infant to walk free on past allegations of abuse. All this and more this week on Courtroom Confidential. We know you have many other options on where to find your true crime news, and we are honored that you have chosen to join us. We're recording this episode on Friday, August 29th, 2025, and this is your Courtroom Confidential weekly roundup. Let's jump in. Testimony continued this week in the trial of 75-year-old Donna Adelson, accused of orchestrating the 2014 murder-for-hire plot that killed her former son-in-law, FSU law professor Dan Markel. 4 people have since been convicted for his murder, including Donna's son, Charlie, who was found guilty in November of 2023. Monday proved to be a watershed moment in the trial, with 2 of Donna's children taking the stand. Donna's daughter, Wendi Adelson, testified for the 4th time in 6 years in connection with her ex-husband's murder. But for the first time ever, the court heard from Donna's oldest son, Robert. Long considered an unindicted co-conspirator in the murder, Wendi Adelson appeared under a state subpoena with an immunity deal to prevent her words from being used against her in any future prosecution. Assistant State Attorney Georgia Kappelman questioned Wendi at length about her divorce from Markel in 2012 and her failed efforts to relocate with her 2 young sons to South Florida, which prosecutors say fueled the motive for the crime. Kappelman grilled her about numerous emails between her and her mother during contentious court proceedings that began with the divorce and continued through child custody fights. Robert Adelson, a doctor from New York and the oldest child of the Adelsons, later took the witness stand himself. He said he considered his mother Donna active in all their kids' lives, but especially Wendi. Quote, after the murder of Dan Markel, did Donna Adelson seem curious about who killed Dan Markel? Assistant State Attorney Sarah Dugan asked. No, Robert responded. Was there a complete lack of curiosity? Yeah, nobody seemed curious, he said. Also taking center stage this week was an undercover operation intended to provoke the Adelson family members into speaking about the murders. In April of 2016, an FBI agent pretending to be a gang member approached Donna on the street in South Florida. On the stand, the agent was asked about the purpose of that meeting known as the bump. A bump can achieve several things, he testified, but the key hope was to spark phone calls on lines already being wiretapped by law enforcement. FBI Special Agent Pat Sanford later took the stand to walk the jury through a mountain of wiretapped phone calls as well as the bump. Sanford told jurors Donna's first call after the bump was to her son, Charlie. The 2 also appeared to be speaking in code, according to prosecutors. Later, Sanford returned to the stand to walk jurors through a lengthy recorded conversation at a Miami restaurant between Charlie and his ex-girlfriend, Katie McBanois, along with more intercepted phone calls. We are live streaming the trial on our sister channel, Courtroom Confidential Live Trials. Be sure to subscribe with your notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the action. What's happening here? Every trial has a moment where the tide turns, where the pieces start to fit together, where the picture begins to take shape, a moment that shifts the momentum and never returns. That moment happened this week with the testimony of Robert Adelson. Robert, the black sheep of the family, the one who left, the one who wasn't, quote unquote, with the family. The normal one. Here is a man who has lived an admirable life. He never got tied up in the drama, never got tied up in this entire mess. And he has watched his whole family slowly descend into manipulation and lies and even murder. In a sense, with his testimony, he became the conscience of the jury, the living embodiment of the reasonable man in all of this. Now, don't get me wrong. There was more concrete evidence of Donna Adelson's guilt presented this week. We had phone calls that were able to link Donna Adelson to Charlie Adelson, to Catherine McBanois, to Sigfredo Garcia, and back again. They had the wiretapped phone calls, which were incredibly damaging. And most importantly, evidence of the bump and how she behaved soon after being told that what she believed were gang members coming after her for the crimes that they had committed. But if all of this evidence was the brains of the trial, then Robert Adelson was certainly the heart of this trial. Here's a man who is tortured, reluctant, conflicted to testify, yet courageous. Here he has seen his own brother go to prison for the rest of his life. His sister, he believes, is likely implicated in murdering her own husband, the father of her children. And now her mother is on trial for her own life, for her role in this murderous scheme. But he did the right thing. He told the truth. And what was the truth? No one was curious about who killed Dan Markel. No one cared to solve this family mystery. Think about that for a moment. And I can assure you the jurors are thinking about it. But think about being in that family. A member of that family is murdered, assassinated, shot for no explicable reason. And instead of this consuming them, the curiosity as to who killed him and why, Rob Adelson describes his other family members as not being curious at all, not being concerned with it. How would you behave? And this is the question the jurors are asking themselves. How would they behave in this situation? You can imagine how it would keep you sleepless, how you would be constantly consumed with who possibly could have killed my family member, who could have killed the father of my grandchildren, who could have killed my ex-husband. I don't care about the fact that they were going through a divorce. I don't care about how bad that got. The idea that they did not seem concerned with it is remarkably powerful evidence. No one cared, but Rob did. Rob cared. He was curious. And when police finally made an arrest and said they had in custody the shooters, the gunmen, the triggermen, the one who killed Dan, he calls his family. And what is their response? Specifically, what is Donna's response? She doesn't want to talk about it. She hangs up the phone. And that is the last time that he spoke to his mother. That is incredibly powerful evidence. That, to me, was the moment that this trial started to be over for Donna Adelson. But what do you guys think? What, in your view, has been the most significant evidence to date? Please let us know in the comments. New allegations have surfaced in the aftermath of Kentucky Judge Kevin Mullins' murder, with claims he ran a sex for favors scheme involving young women. Taya Adams told News Nation that Mullins, who was shot in his Letcher County chambers by Sheriff Shawn Mickey Stines last September, and others coerced women into sex acts to get out of trouble or in exchange for money. Quote, "We would do sex parties and perform shows and have sex with them for money, things like that," Adams alleged. "It was consensual, but it was the thing that we were so young, and then they used it against us and to destroy our lives later." She said she felt forced to go along with the judge's scheme because she feared Child Protective Services would somehow get involved and upend her life. It wasn't clear if the woman had any prior run-ins with the law or if she was on CPS's radar at the time. She went on to say it was just a given. She would keep her mouth shut, saying, "Who would believe it anyway?" Because the whole town was doing it. Nobody cares. They're all swingers. It's all a big party to them. It was just so normal. Former Deputy Jailer Sarah Davis said the rumors were nasty and sickening and confirmed they were widely known in the community. "Pretty much everybody in the county knows," she said, "but it was confirmed to me after working in the county jail, especially after being invited to a party myself." These claims echo a 2022 probe where another woman, Sabrina Atkins, told police she saw Mullins having sex in chambers and alleged a deputy recorded videos. Atkins claims she was coerced by the then Deputy Sheriff Ben Fields to perform sexual favors in exchange for staying under house arrest. Fields was later jailed for rape and sodomy of a female inmate. Authorities have not confirmed whether these allegations relate to Mullins' killing, but have previously refused to rule out if a possible sex scandal was the motive. Stines, who was friends with Mullins for decades, pled not guilty to a charge of murder of a public official and is being held without bond. What is happening here? I don't even know where to begin. If these allegations are true, we are talking about a scandal of profound proportions for this community. Does it excuse murder? Of course no. But does it at least add context for what was before now a completely inexplicable killing? I seem to think so. The question now becomes, what will come of all this information? Can it be used by the defense? My first instinct is to say no. There is no argument for self-defense here, even defense of others. There was no immediacy of danger, no reasonableness in his actions. But if I am Mickey Stines' defense team, I feel like you are at this moment trying to move heaven and earth to somehow introduce this information in front of a jury, even if that means Mickey Stines himself taking the stand. Otherwise, what are you left with? Otherwise, you have a cold-blooded murder caught on tape with no explanation as to motive. And the prosecution would love for it to remain that way. And maybe in the eyes of the law, that is the right thing. Maybe it should not matter what was happening. Maybe it should not matter what this judge was up to, allegedly. Bad people shouldn't be murdered either. I understand it and I get it. And perhaps that is why Stines and his defense team are pushing so heavily for this mental health defense. He saw all this corruption. He witnessed it. He knew it was going on for years. And finally, it broke him. He snapped and he did a horrible thing, but perhaps for a good yet very misguided reason. But what do you guys think? Does any of this new information change your mind at all about this crime? Please let us know in the comments. Officials revealed new details Wednesday in the case of Jake and Rebecca Haro, the California couple accused of murdering their 7-month-old son, Emmanuel. Riverside County District Attorney Michael Hestron said investigators have a pretty strong indication of where the remains of baby Emmanuel are, while sharply criticizing a judge's past decision to spare Jake Haro prison time in a 2023 child abuse case. Quote, "What we wanted out of the case was prison. We believed it was a prison case and that Jake Haro should have gone to prison. Jake Haro pled straight up to the court. In this case, a judge here in Riverside County, who happened to have been a visiting judge from San Bernardino County, gave Mr. Haro a suspended sentence," Hestron said. Jake Haro was arrested in 2018 and prosecuted alongside his ex-wife for child abuse, neglect, and cruelty. Hestron said the judge essentially chose to give Jake probation, which he described as an outrageous error in judgment. Quote, "I don't have a problem saying that," Hestron said. "If that judge had done his job, which he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today." Jake and Rebecca Haro were formally charged this week with murder and filing a false report. Rebecca initially claimed Emmanuel was kidnapped from a Yucaipa sporting goods store parking lot during an assault that left her with a black eye. Authorities quickly flagged inconsistencies in her story in the days following the alleged kidnapping and said both parents were uncooperative. Jake was recently seen assisting detectives in a search along the 60 freeway for his son's remains. Though the child's body has not been located, both parents are being held without bail. Rebecca has maintained her innocence while in custody, telling a group of reporters on Sunday that she isn't giving up on her baby and that she wishes she were out searching for him. The couple will return to court on Thursday, September 4th, for their arraignment. What's happening here? I've been doing this for a long time, and I will tell you, it is almost unheard of for a DA to call out a judge with this kind of vitriol. Usually, prosecutors like to maintain some sort of reserve to uphold the integrity of the system above all else, to have a soft touch when criticizing the bench, to speak in coded language about these types of things, but not here. This DA unloaded both barrels. And you know what? Bravo. Bravo for him. It needed to be done. I was a prosecutor for many, many years. And one of the driving forces of the prosecution office is don't let this happen again. Stop crime where you can before it happens. Catch the bad guys before they do worse. It's, in fact, almost a fear that dwells within the prosecutor's office. Don't mess this up. Don't allow this person to get away with this now and go on to do something even worse in the future. They are afraid of this exact scenario that we're talking about here today. And judges sometimes get in the way. I've experienced that as well. It's incredibly frustrating for judges to take the role of the prosecutor out of their own hands. But this is one of the most grievous examples I have ever seen. Here is what that baby, by the way, that 2023 plea deal that Jake Haro entered into, here is what his child, his infant in that case went through. That baby had fractured ribs, a broken skull, and brain hemorrhages. That infant was bedridden and to this day has permanent injuries. Now you have him in the system, in the radar of law enforcement. Now he's in front of a judge. Now something can be done about it. Now you can stop him from doing this again. But not only does the system fail, and specifically this judge, but you give him a free pass. For shame. The criminal justice system shouldn't be just about moving the docket along. It should be about justice. It should be about protecting the community. It should be about making sure that what happened to baby Emmanuel is not something that could have been prevented. But what do you guys think? Where do you think the blame falls in this situation? Please let us know in the comments. Before we dive into the other cases making headlines this week, I'm going to stop for a moment and just ask you to do one very small favor for me. And that is, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel now. We want to continue to provide you with the highest quality content that we possibly can. And the best way that we can do that is through your support. Also making headlines, defense attorneys for a Massachusetts man accused of murdering and dismembering his wife remain stalled while prosecutors review sealed federal files linked to a disgraced former Massachusetts state trooper. Brian Walshe faces murder charges in the January 2023 death of his wife, Anna Walshe. His trial is scheduled to begin in October. The records known as the Proctor files stem from an earlier and unrelated investigation and include communications that led to Trooper Michael Proctor's firing. Walsh's defense argues the files could reveal investigative bias and are pushing for access under Rule 14 discovery requirements. The rule mandates prosecutors turn over potentially exculpatory evidence that could benefit the defense. Proctor was fired from his position following revelations of biased and inappropriate text messages about Mansfield area woman Karen Reed during her investigation. Reed was acquitted this year of second-degree murder and manslaughter in the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The documents were originally slated for destruction in July following a statutory deadline. However, a federal judge has extended the timeline while prosecutors review the materials to determine what should be disclosed to Walshe and defendants in other cases. Assistant District Attorney Lisa Beatty said prosecutors are continuing to review the files to identify material that should be turned over to the defendants. The complex workflow of separating grand jury from non-grand jury materials has slowed the process. Defense attorneys raised concerns about how they can challenge the withholding of records if they don't know what the records contain. The Commonwealth was asked by the presiding judge to address this procedural dilemma before the next hearing. The next status hearing is scheduled for September 15th. A Grammy Award-winning rapper took the stand this week in a Los Angeles County courtroom as she fights a lawsuit claiming she attacked a security guard outside an obstetrician's office. Cardi B is accused of assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, and false imprisonment in a lawsuit that stems from a 2018 incident. Cardi told a jury Wednesday that she didn't touch a security guard who alleges the rapper cut her face with a fingernail and spat at her in an altercation. Ron Rosenjanvaza, lawyer for the plaintiff Imani Ellis, asked Cardi if she had been angry. "Yes, I was angry because I'm pregnant," Cardi replied. and this girl's about to beat my ass. Cardi said she had been visiting Los Angeles doing promotional work in February of 2018. She was 4 months into her first pregnancy, but had only told her inner circle she was having a baby, but not the public or her parents. The obstetrician's office had been closed to other patients for her privacy. She said Ellis followed her to her 5th floor appointment. Cardi said she heard Ellis say her name into a phone and appeared to be filming her. Cardi feared Ellis would expose her pregnancy to the public. I told her, "Why are you recording?" Cardi testified. And she said, "Oh, my bad," and practically apologized. But the argument grew increasingly heated, she said. And we were arguing, she's backing me. She's walking into me. She didn't touch me, Cardi said. She was going to touch me, but she didn't get to touch me. Ellis testified earlier in the trial that the incident left her humiliated and traumatized, and the scar on her face required cosmetic surgery. Ellis, who lost her job over the incident, is seeking damages that include medical expenses, compensation for emotional and physical suffering, and lost wages, along with punitive damages. The lawsuit does not specify a total amount, but Cardi said from the stand that she is suing me for $24 million. Trial is expected to conclude with closing arguments on Tuesday, September 2nd. The mayor of a small Georgia town was convicted this week for a deadly crash that occurred a decade ago when he was a state trooper. Following a mistrial in 2019, a new jury found Buchanan Mayor Anthony James A.J. Scott guilty on 5 of 6 charges, including 1 count of homicide by vehicle in the 2nd degree, 2 counts of serious injury by vehicle, and speeding. He was acquitted of homicide by vehicle in the 2nd degree. Prosecutors argued Scott was driving nearly 90 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone without lights or sirens when he struck another car, killing 16-year-old Isabella Chinchilla and 17-year-old Kylie Lindsay and seriously injuring 2 others. Scott stood trial for the first time in May of 2019, but that trial ended in a mistrial when the jury was deliberating after defense attorneys found that prosecutors failed to tell defense attorneys that one of the investigating troopers had a theory that Lindsay had been sitting in the front of the car at the time of the crash rather than in the back seat. Defendant A.J. Scott took the stand Monday and admitted he was speeding without lights or sirens and not responding to a dispatch when he was involved in a fatal crash. Scott's defense blamed driver Dylan Wall's failure to yield for the fatal crash and suggested that Wall was with 2 pretty girls and distracted when the collision occurred. Wall suffered a fractured skull while Benjamin Finken, a passenger, suffered a traumatic brain injury. Jurors deliberated for nearly 2 full days before rendering their verdict. Scott faces more than 30 years in prison, with sentencing still to be scheduled. The husband of a Northern California woman who went missing last year has been arrested in connection with her death, authorities announced last Wednesday. Nikki Chang Saley McCain's family reported that they had not heard from her or seen her since May 18th of 2024. The Shasta County District Attorney's Office said Nikki's phone was last connected to the network at her home just after 3 a.m. on May 18th. Witnesses' statements and forensic data showed that she was at home with her husband, Tyler McCain, during the early morning hours that day. Investigators say forensic evidence, including a white sheet with blood belonging to Nikki located in her truck's bed, and DNA linking her husband to the scene, pointed to him as a suspect. Prosecutors also described an overwhelming odor of decomposition coming from the truck's bed, which had an enclosed covering. Prosecutors said a confidential report also revealed he admitted to killing her after a domestic violence incident. In 2023, Nikki was contacted at a local hospital where a deputy observed a black eye and other facial trauma. Nikki said she was physically assaulted by Tyler for about 3 hours just days before, and that she feared for her life. Domestic violence charges were filed but later dismissed when Nikki failed to appear in court. Quote, "The dismissal of the domestic violence case was necessary because we would not have been able to prove the case without her testimony, without also having to prove that Tyler McCain caused Nikki's disappearance," said Shasta County District Attorney Stephanie Bridget. In March of this year, detectives along with FBI and Homeland Security agents served a search warrant on Nikki's home and ruled that she was the victim of a homicide. Tyler has been charged with murder with a special circumstance alleging the killing was committed to prevent testimony. To this day, Nikki's body has not been found. In a court hearing last Friday, Tyler pled not guilty to all the charges. He's being held without bond. A Southern California man has been charged with murder after his wife's body was found in Angeles National Forest 4 days after a friend reported her missing. Authorities say footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera captured Yasimer Cabrera dragging a large object wrapped in a tarp from the couple's Lancaster apartment days before the remains of his wife, Shayla Cabrera, were discovered on August 16th. Soon after, Cabrera fled to his native Peru with the couple's 3 children. He was briefly detained both in Mexico and Peru after crossing the border by land, but was released as he had not yet been charged. An extradition warrant was filed last week to begin the process to bring Cabrera back to the U.S., a process authorities say could take several months. The couple's 3 sons remain in protective custody in Peru. Shayla Cabrera's mother told reporters that her daughter had been physically abused by her husband, who initially told family members that Shayla had been taken away by U.S. immigration authorities. Shayla's exact cause of death has yet to be released by investigators from the LA County Medical Examiner's Office, but special circumstances filed by the district attorney's office allege that a knife was used in her killing. If convicted, Cabrera could face 26 years to life in prison. Police in New York are on the hunt for the drug dealers believed to have supplied the fatal dose that killed an Irish swimwear designer earlier this month. Martha Nolan Oslatara was found unconscious aboard a boat on the exclusive Montauk Yacht Club on August 5th. The boat is one of at least 2 Grateful Dead-themed 54-foot Sea Ray craft owned by insurance mogul Christopher Dernan. Investigators suspect her death was an accidental overdose, noting a powdery white substance was found next to her body, though authorities have not confirmed whether it was heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, or a mix. Authorities have referenced the use of Chelsea's Law that would give prosecutors more leeway when prosecuting dealers by adding drug-induced manslaughter or homicide by sale of an opiate-controlled substance to the books. The bill is named for Chelsea Murray, 31, who died on Long Island in August of 2022 after using fentanyl-laced heroin. Last year, her dealer, Jaquan Casserly, was sentenced to 10 years after he pled guilty to felony drug sales. Nolan Oslatara's toxicology results are pending, with a final report expected by early September. I was checking my emails for criminal defense inquiries, and I had to wade through what felt like hundreds of spam emails just to find a few legitimate ones. It was frustrating, but more than that, it was a wake-up call. That kind of junk doesn't just show up by itself. So I Googled myself just to see what was out there, and it was disturbing. There were sites that listed my telephone number, my email address, even the names and addresses of my friends. And I didn't put any of it out there. It made me feel very exposed, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. That is why we are very excited to announce our first ever sponsor, Aura. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number and why you have an inbox full of junk, this is why. Brokers collect and sell your information without your permission and make billions doing it. Even though they are legally required to move it if you request them to do so, sometimes getting that done is almost impossible. Aura does the hard part for you, automatically requesting removal from those shady websites and keeping that info off from them. We talk about security and crime all of the time on this channel, and I wasn't protecting myself. I was like the plumber whose own pipes leak at home. It's an all-in-one digital security platform. You get alerts if your information is found on the dark web, fraud alerts from your bank, a VPN, an antivirus, a password manager, and even $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's all in one app with US-based support 24/7. That's why I chose Aura and why we are recommending it to all of you. You can try it free for 14 days if you just go to aura.com/courtroom confidential. In those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and neither should you. It's a great product, and it's a great way to support the channel. Please check it out. Before we get to what's coming up next week, I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of this growing community, and to give a very special shout out to Bobby Solis Bibb for the review on Spotify, and to our CC crew members, Carolyn Neal, 2194, and Cakes Boo Ah for their support over on YouTube. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. And please keep those reviews coming. We appreciate your help in spreading the word about Courtroom Confidential. On the docket for next week, Colorado man Barry Morphew, charged in the death of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, will be in court on Tuesday, September 2nd for a pretrial hearing. Alleged Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann will return to court on Wednesday, September 3rd for a status conference. Kelly Bryant, the Michigan mother accused of leaving her 3 children to fend for themselves in a filthy home for years, is due in court Thursday, September 4th for a pretrial hearing. Megan Boswell, the Tennessee mother found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of her 15-month-old daughter, Evelyn Boswell, will be back in court for a sentencing hearing on Friday, September 5th. Although the jury sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole on the murder charges, her sentencing hearing will determine if the other charges, which include aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect, and abuse of a corpse, will be merged and how they will be served. And finally, please join us this Sunday for our special question and answer series, Sunday Funday. All are invited to leave us a voice message at thecourtroomconfidential.com, which I will answer live during tomorrow's show at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. You can find the live stream on YouTube, X, and Facebook. And that is it for us this week, folks. I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find us on social media at CR Confidential on X, at The Courtroom Confidential on Instagram, and at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Thank you again for joining me. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again next week for another episode of Courtroom Confidential.